After President Obama's State of the Union speech earlier this week, we discussed how great many of the ideas he mentioned were, but how unlikely they were to succeed. And what's fascinating is that we think we have a system where our elected officials represent the wills and legislative desires of the constituents. But as I've mentioned to you many times, we do not. And we have a new poll which shows us that in spite of the fact that the Republican-controlled House and Senate are very unlikely to actually allow or even explore passing some of the ideas President Obama proposed, all of his proposals were very, very popular with actual Americans. Minimum wage. We now have, I guess, 2 or maybe even 3 State of the Union addresses where President Obama talked a lot about minimum wage and working salaries and living wages, etc. And in spite of the fact that so many states have opted not to pass minimum wage increases and that we see such opposition federally to an increase in the federal minimum wage, a 2014 poll found that 73% of Americans actually favor raising the federal minimum wage to $10.10 per hour. On education, a recent poll found that Americans support President Obama's subsidized community college proposal by 53 to 44. Not overwhelming support, but still a 9-point margin in favor. Gun reform. President Obama has tried to prioritize gun reform. Congress has repeatedly rejected legislation that would even support stricter background checks, in spite of the fact that a recent poll shows that 79% or more of all Americans support stricter gun background checks. 85% of Americans thought that all gun purchasers, even at private gun shows, should have to pass a background check. We couldn't get that through Congress. On tax reform, polling shows that Americans support increasing taxes on the rich by a 2-to-1 margin. No chance, Lewis, no chance whatsoever of passing a Republican House and Senate. On climate change, we see, as I told you, 72% of Senate Republicans are climate deniers to some extent, although polls show that 72% of Americans support more pollution controls, 70% of Americans want more wildlife refuges protected, and 66% of Americans believe that we should be expanding renewable sources of energy. Tough to get traction. And on immigration, 52 to 44 Americans support President Obama's executive action on immigration. Almost no Republicans support it at all. So again, a total disconnect between what those who are voting want and what those who are voted in choose to pursue.
I don't know why they think that. I think they have this idea that you are elected, so the people chose you because they like your ideas and they like what you have to say about things and they want you to do things the way you would. But clearly, there are some big differences here between what the voters want and what the officials want.
It almost seems like this silly romantic notion that our elected officials might actually do what the constituents want rather than what lobbyists or their biggest donors or corporations want them to do. I guess I'm just a hopeless romantic, Lewis. I still imagine that maybe our elected officials would do what the constituents want.
Maybe one day, maybe if we fix money in politics and perhaps expand the number of the members of Congress, I don't know.